right now on a very special California Live.
It's not okay. You know what? You're right. It's not okay.
A heartbreaking story of courage.
Cash is the bravest kid I know.
A mother and father fight to save their little boy.
My wife is a fighter. I think she just had it in her gut. It's something else. It's something else.
A modern-day medical marvel takes us inside his brain. And the doctor this little boy's parents are now calling a miracle worker. It's all next on California Live.
You know, we talk a lot here about living your best California life, and for a young family and their amazing little boy, it's been an incredible struggle.
It really has, and on this very special edition of California Live, we want you to meet a very brave 3-year-old named Cash and his courageous parents. They're a family you won't forget.
This adorable little guy is Cash, the picture of courage.
Cash is the bravest kid I know.
His father, Will, is an actor on The Good Doctor.
Her symptoms are very mild. They're typical post-op reactions, except the one that suddenly appeared as soon as we told her she could go home.
His mother, Jennifer, is an actor too, but Cash is the star of his own real-life medical drama.
It's not okay. You know what? You're right. It's not okay. I'm sorry I said that. You're absolutely right.
Cash's famous mom and dad met through mutual friends. Their relationship started more like a romantic comedy than a love story.
We met in 2006. We became friends and then realized that we were neighbors. And then Will was thinking of people to set me up with, which was weird. And then turns out he's the one all along. And then, I don't know what happened.
And we just ended up with a kid.
That kid was Cash, and he quickly became the heart of their family. But their fairy tale came crashing down literally overnight. Just 3 days after his 3rd birthday, Cash had his first stroke.
I was getting ready to put him to bed, and I went to put on his pajamas, and he couldn't move his whole right side at all. Like, he actually really can't move. And then I said, hold up 2 fingers. And he used his left hand. And at the time, he was completely right-handed, like definitely dominant right. And he's like, Mommy, I can't. And I mean, he couldn't even. It was like it had just been cut off. Like, it didn't work at all, at all. So I call my pediatrician. She tells me the closest urgent care. And we rush there, and while they're examining him, his face goes asymmetrical. And the doctor said, I have to be honest with you, I've never seen this before. We need to get him to the ER. So the nurse there was a godsend and threw us in her minivan, because I was hysterical, put us in her minivan. She's calling my husband, who was in New York at the time, and she drove us to the emergency room. And that's kind of where it all started. It was awful.
And I was just waiting by the phone, and my next 3 days were big production value days on a New York street. So, you know, you're talking millions of dollars. And I called my producer, and he said, get on a plane.
Jennifer and Will thought their little boy was about to die.
My initial reaction was, it's a brain tumor. That's the only thing I could think of. I didn't even know children could have strokes, first of all.
Then came the diagnosis, something called CNS vasculitis.
CNS vasculitis is central nervous system vasculitis. They thought he had primary CNS vasculitis, meaning it was contained to the brain. You can have systemic, which is throughout the body, or you can have primary. They thought that Cash had primary CNS vasculitis, which is an autoimmune disease.
The diagnosis was devastating enough, but the treatment was absolutely terrifying. Heavy chemotherapy every other Monday for 12 excruciating hours at a time.
And that was really, really hard, because then we come home, the list of medicines that he had to take on a sometimes 3 times a day basis, and to shove prescription drugs down my baby's throat was horrible. That for me, sorry, that's the worst. Because, sorry, to not know if they're working and then he was still so incredibly symptomatic.
Will walked off the set of a hospital and raced to cash at a real one.
I remember being in a scene and it was something had happened and
Uh-oh.
Mommy's just doing your tourniquet. Watch me.
Look how brave you are.
Through every minute of the 7.5 months of grueling chemo, Will and Jennifer were haunted, wondering if Cash had been misdiagnosed and if they were actually hurting their little boy.
my wife has a sixth sense, I mean, as most moms, and she says, it's not right, something's not right, and they were just about to double up the chemo. The doctors originally saying, this is how we have to be more aggressive.
Then, Cash had his second major stroke.
He went to bed on the 19th laughing, reading a book, and he woke up on February 20th and couldn't utter a single word. Could not speak a word. He could only moan, his face was drooping, he could not swallow, he couldn't move his tongue. So that's when I knew something was not right, because what should work if you have CNS vasculitis wasn't even, like, making a dent.
With that, Jennifer and Will were more convinced than ever that Cash had been misdiagnosed, and a specialist in Boston finally confirmed what they had suspected all along.
I do not think this child has CNS vasculitis. He needs to be treated immediately for Moyamoya.
Moyamoya is a rare disease that blocks blood flow in the veins and arteries of the brain. The good news, no more chemotherapy. The bad news, this courageous little boy who had already been through so much now needed brain surgery.
I just thought I was gonna die.
How a marvel of modern medicine and a miracle worker team up to fight to save Cash's life.
Yeah, it's next on California Live. Stay with us. So your 3-year-old has suffered 2 major strokes, and now you're told he needs major brain surgery.
Danny, I can't even imagine. My Noah just turned 3 yesterday, so
Yeah.
you know it's just really terrifying.
Yeah, it has to be terrifying, but for little Cash's parents, it was their only real hope of saving their son.
Mommy's just doing your tourniquet. Watch me.
Look how brave you are.
With every stick of a needle or tear of a piece of tape, 3-year-old Cash would let out a tiny cry as a tear trickled down his cheek.
You're so brave, buddy.
After suffering a major stroke just 3 days after his 3rd birthday, this brave little boy endured 7.5 months of intense chemotherapy.
That for me, sorry, that's the worst. Because, sorry.
He was being treated for CNS vasculitis, a rare disease that attacks the central nervous system.
Wait till you see the video.
Cash, you have like cotton head.
Oh my
You
God.
look like a snowman.
His mom, Jennifer, and dad, Will, had a gut feeling their little boy had been misdiagnosed. They got a 2nd, 3rd, 4th opinions from doctors all over the country.
I promise I cannot write this. It's crazy. We were about to leave because I was fed up and I was irritated. And at that point, I was like, you know, you go through these phases as a parent where you start to actually settle into what you've been told. And then you have those fiery moments when you're like, screw this, everyone's wrong, I'll never stop.
My wife is a fighter. I think she just had it in her gut. It's something else, it's something else.
Then Cash had another major stroke. Finally, one doctor told them they were right. Cash did not have CNS vasculitis, and they needed to take him to Stanford University.
In fact, he turned out to have a different disease, Moyamoya disease. We don't completely understand what the disease is, but we believe that it is a type of what's called a vasculopathy, not an acute inflammation, but a disease of the blood vessels where there is progressive obliteration or narrowing of the vessels at the base of the brain.
Dr. Gary Steinberg, the chairman of neurosurgery and director of the Stroke Center at Stanford University, had to tell Will and Jennifer their little boy now needed brain surgery. Not one, but two.
His disease affected both sides of his brain, and so we knew that he needed bilateral surgeries to revascularize not just the left brain, which was already symptomatic, but the right brain, which had radiologic indications of disease. If Cash didn't have his bilateral surgeries to provide more blood flow to his brain, it's highly likely he would have had more strokes, and very likely he would have been disabled.
Dr. Steinberg would have to reroute the blood flow in Cash's brain.
Essentially, to bypass the occluded vessels, the occluded Moyamoya vessels, and provide a new conduit of blood flow to the brain.
It was a delicate procedure using arteries as plumbing to pipe in the blood.
Open the membrane covering the brain, and then place the artery on the surface of the brain and allow it to grow in new vessels.
The thought of operating on their little boy's brain terrified Will and Jennifer, but Dr. Steinberg had a special weapon to help fight for Cash. Some say it's a miracle of modern medicine, called surgical theater.
Surgical theater is a type of three-dimensional virtual reality that, in my view, has revolutionized the way we can approach surgery, plan surgery, educate patients, and engage patients.
Now look at the
Surgical theater gave Dr. Steinberg a fascinating and detailed look into Cash's head before he would ever lift a scalpel.
The way it's done is to take the radiologic imaging, and that can be an MR scan or MR angiogram, a CT scan. We can create a three-dimensional visualization and have a 360-degree visualization or version of what we're seeing. And what's unique is that this represents that patient's individual anatomy or pathology. It's not a generic model, and so it has a huge advantage for planning the surgery. We can actually rehearse the surgery, and it makes it much safer and easier for the surgeon and the patient. So using surgical theater 3D virtual reality, I was able to more precisely analyze Cash's vasculature and determine where he needed the new blood vessels, determine whether there were any special problems that I was going to encounter that I would not have been able to really appreciate on the conventional imaging.
After several rehearsals with surgical theater, Dr. Steinberg was ready, and the little boy who's taught us all the true meaning of courage arrived smiling.
Well, this is what we're doing.
As his dad carried him down the hall of the hospital at Stanford.
Cash is the bravest kid I know.
A few hours later, Cash was in his mom's arms, his head wrapped in bandages.
It's okay. It's okay.
No.
Just 1 week later, Cash was back for a second surgery.
So proud of you, buddy.
You are the most handsome boy I've ever seen in my life.
Cash survived the second surgery, but there was a problem.
Cash had had a seizure where he had lost speech and everything after the second surgery, and so it was really a scary day.
Thankfully, a short time later, his speech was back, his tears were gone, and this incredible little boy was putting together a puzzle.
So Nemo's up.
And if that's not remarkable enough, just listen as Cash and his mom calmly talk about the hell he survived.
I have vasculitis, CNS.
CNS? No, it's so now remember that thing called Moyamoya that they think you have now?
No, I was gonna say that. Remember I had those strokes?
Those strokes, yeah, I remember that. And they thought...
And they thought it was,
Moya.
Moya, and they were like, it was.
They were. So the only way to help with Moyamoya is, guess what?
What?
Surgery. That is the only way that it can help. So today, they went inside your brain and they moved something around and then they sewed it right back up.
Coming up, Dr. Steinberg takes us inside Cash's brain.
That's next, right here on California Live. Welcome back. 3-year-old Cash Yoon Lee survived 2 invasive brain surgeries in the span of a week, and now we are joined by the man Cash's parents are calling a miracle worker, the chairman of neurosurgery at Stanford University, Dr. Gary Steinberg.
And Dr. Steinberg, could you have done these surgeries without surgical theater?
We could have done the surgeries without surgical theater, but it would not have been as safe or precise for Cash.
So now Cash was actually misdiagnosed with CNS vasculitis. Do you think that this surgical theater was kind of helping you pinpoint Moyamoya?
Yes, it really helped to confirm the diagnosis. His initial diagnosis of a vasculitis or inflammation of the brain vessels was incorrect, and that's not uncommon. Unfortunately, with Moyamoya, since it's a rare disease, we're trying to increase awareness of it. But the surgical theater allowed us to precisely pinpoint where the disease was, and that helped us to make the diagnosis of Moyamoya rather than vasculitis.
Yeah, this is also fascinating. So we have our virtual reality goggles, and Dr. Steinberg, you're going to take us all through what you saw. You said before, during, after the surgery,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
So go ahead and put your goggles on.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, and now let me reset it.
All right. Oh, wow.
Now,
look at that.
You are looking at a visualization of Cash's brain. Here you can see is the scalp artery that I used and I chose with surgical theater to revascularize Cash's brain and provide more blood flow. Now I'm going to zoom in through the hole that I left for the graft to enter.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh.
Now we are inside his skull and brain, and you can see all the vessels now that are supplying his brain. There were very few of these before the surgery, and if you look to your left,
And there's a lot
see
more
the skull.
now after the surgery because you were able to open that up.
Exactly, and the arteries that I placed on the brain surface grew in all these vessels that you see. And actually, this is interesting, on the other side, there's the vessel I used on his other side, on his right brain. You see it coming in right here through the hole?
Yes.
And it's laying on the surface, and here are some of the vessels you can actually see that grew out of that. It sprouted new vessels. And if you look to the right, you can see a dense collection of blood vessels.
Wow, we're going to take off our headsets now. Well, we would love for you to stay with us, Dr. Steinberg, because Cash and his mom, Jennifer, are joining us in studio.
They're going to talk for the very first time about their journey from hell and back. That's next on California Live.
Are Cash and his mom. And here they are, Cash and his mom, Jennifer. Hi, Cash. Hey, little man. You are so brave.
So cute. And Jennifer, we've already selected you as Mother of the Year. Just in case you didn't know already, what you and your husband have done to fight for Cash is so inspiring. And we've got to let everyone know, how is he doing now? How are you doing now?
I have a different story, but Cash is good.
He looks good.
We're really good. We're really grateful. He loves those cameras. We're really grateful, especially to, of course, Dr. Steinberg. But we're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
You are now wanting to be an advocate. You want people to know the story and just let people know that they have to really fight for their children.
Absolutely. I think, you know, for me, I knew for a long time that something just wasn't right with the first diagnosis, but I'm not a doctor, and it was hard to sort of say that to people who are greatly educated in their department, and you know, I was a cheerleader, so you're like, who am I to say you're missing something or something's not right? But I just knew something wasn't right. And then when I realized he couldn't possibly be that good of an actor, despite his genetics.
Despite his genetics. We want Dr. Steinberg to show you what we saw in the goggles. So bring them. Let's bring them on out. The virtual reality goggles.
Help you put them on. And this is actually the first time that you're going to be
I've
seeing
not seen
this.
this.
Yeah, this is incredible.
So this is so.
Okay.
Oh, this is incredible.
This is your baby boy.
Take us through, Dr. Steinberg, what you guys are seeing right now.
So, Jennifer, you can see Cash's brain. This is after surgery.
Okay.
And here's the vessel that I used. This is the scalp vessel that I chose.
Okay.
And this is what's supplying new blood to his brain on the left side. And I'm going to take you into his brain. We're going to zoom right through this hole that I left.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow.
And now we are inside his skull and brain.
Oh my God.
And if you look to the left, you can see the front. If you look,
I'm literally, okay, sorry.
look to the right, and you can see all the new vessels. Many of these have grown in from the vessels we placed on the surface of the brain. They sprouted new blood vessels to supply his brain and prevent further strokes.
Yes.
And if you look deep here, you can see on the other side, that's the right side of his brain, there's the scalp artery that comes through the hole, laying on the surface, and here are some of the vessels that grew in from that scalp artery.
Amazing.
So if you recall, before surgery, he had very few vessels in his brain because of the Moyamoya, and now he's got a large number of them with excellent revascularization and blood supply.
That's so amazing.
God.
So let's take off the headsets. All right.
Back to reality.
Wasn't that crazy? Yeah, it's very crazy.
Incredible to know that they were able to just get a detailed look of your son's, you know, vessels and skull and everything that's inside before they even did anything. Which,
it's crazy.
And what does this journey feel like today? Like, we're watching Cash right now. He is playing around. He is just, you know, you would never know he went through all of this.
As time goes on, I'm slowly getting better. You know, it's tricky to go through something where you were told specifically with so much confidence from doctors that he had one thing, and then it turns out he actually didn't have that. So it's hard for me to trust and to move forward. And even when I see, he knows, like even when I see blatantly in front of me a scan or something, I still have, you know, all the negative things go through your mind. But we're working on it. I'm working on it. He's great, but I'm working on it.
We're all working on it as parents.
And Dr. Steinberg, what's the future like for him?
I think the future is very bright for Cash. Now that he's got excellent blood supply to both sides of his brain, he should be secure in terms of no further strokes and leading a normal life.
You are such an inspiration, and ahead of Mother's Day, we just wanted to give you a little special something because what you have done and what you've gone through, you know, being a mom in general is just
Happy Mother's Day!
Oh my gosh! Oh my God, you guys!
Look
and we have some toys
for you, Cash. You got some dinosaurs, buddy.
Oh my God, I want to cry. Oh,
thank you.
You know, being a mom is truly just
being
amazing.
so inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you, you guys.
And thank you for sharing your story. This is really, truly amazing. So.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. And everyone, have a great Mother's Day.